And to elaborate on Afghan Aid Conference in Brussels, I'm joined by Michael O'Hanlon. He's Senior Fellow and Director of Research and Foreign Policy at the Brookings Institution here in Washington, D.C. Michael, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
$15 billion over the next 4 years. It's a lot of money. So what does this continued financial aid from the international community show?
Well, great question, Elaine. You know, Afghanistan's been through a couple of years of difficult economics, obviously a lot of years of difficult security conditions. But even though the economy did well for much of the 2000s, relative to a very low base or starting point, of course, it slowed down in the last 2 to 3 years as NATO really pulled most of its forces and therefore most of its logistical requirements and most of its stimulus to the Afghan economy out of the country, out of the region. And so growth has been at around 1.5% a year, which is, of course, not nearly enough to keep up with the needs of the population or even the population growth itself. So we're really in a transitional period where Afghanistan is sort of adjusting to a more normal level, if you will, of outside military presence, or at least a much more modest level. And it still has huge problems with corruption, of course, but at least it has a good president and chief executive who I think are trying to confront the corruption problem more successfully and certainly more doggedly than President Karzai had done. So that's sort of where we are, and I think it would be a mistake of me or anyone else to promise huge results over a 4-year time frame. But we're at a point of transition, certainly still in the post-Karzai period, in the post-NATO war period, and you know, we're sort of helping them nurse it along as they hopefully fend off the Taliban for a few more years, the hope being that at some point the Taliban in Pakistan will realize the Afghan government's not going to collapse, and it's better to make peace, make some kind of a compromise with that government rather than try to defeat it. That's sort of an historical sweep where we are right now with this kind of effort.
So, Michael, how will this money help Afghanistan? You know, it's received billions of dollars in the past, and considering all the recent attacks and the bombings, has that really helped?
Well, you know, we had a conversation here at Brookings this week with David Petraeus and with Jim Dobbins, who had been a key official there, and others, Ron Newman, Jim Cunningham. And Jim Dobbins pointed out that, in fact, Afghanistan made more progress in human and development indicators of quality of life than any other country on earth this century. Now, I don't want to overstate the point. That's primarily because Afghanistan was in such a horrible condition before the overthrow of the Taliban in 2001. But there has been a lot to show for the investment. Unfortunately, there's also been a war economy that developed that thrived on corruption, that thrived on a lot of these foreign, you know, almost unnatural stimuli economically. And now they're adjusting to a slightly more normal kind of situation. And so I think we have to see whether Afghanistan can now take the next step towards sustainable infrastructure, developing some agricultural markets in South Asia, trying to find some of the other sweet spots in its potential, long-term, maybe mineral exploitation, some of the things that can get it on a path towards sustained growth on its own. But they're not there yet.
All right, Michael O'Hanlon, as always, we appreciate your perspective. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.